Welcome to Spark the Radically Authentic Life. Now, don't forget to go subscribe on YouTube or iTunes or your other favorite podcast app, and find us on Facebook at thespark.love Facebook group, where you can upload your own images, ask questions, find out about the next classes and live streams and questions and answers, and be part of the community. I can't wait to connect with you there. Welcome to the show. My guest today is Jacob Nordby, and I have his book here. The cover says it all. Blessed are the weird. So that says everything. I love the book. I love the website name. I love you. Let's just jump in. Why are the weird blessed?
Well, that's a quick, we're just in the deep end here. So the blessed weird, I've discovered in one of the chapters, I say you might be a weird person because I discovered a lot of people have this idea of, well, we're all weird. Well, yeah, everyone has personality quirks, but the people I'm talking about here are those who have kind of led the way down through history, Michelle, in going below the surface of their own drives and motivations and the survival to create art, and to create art, whether that was inventing something or whether that was creating something visual or like music or writing a book. So I don't really put art in an artsy category. I feel like anything that's coming truly from that place deep within that's creative is art. And I taught, my youngest brother brought this up the other day. He said, art is what happens when we get beyond survival. So when we're in just absolute survival, it's hard to think of anything that's just extra. So art is extra. Art's that beautiful building, that's beautiful meal. It's art is beauty in life. So I feel like the blessed weird are those who have been always able to capture those moments, even in times when survival was hard.
That's interesting, because I was just going to say I've not been to Africa, but I have friends who've been to Africa who say that there is this energy of sort of creativity and the drumming and the beauty. And I have been to India, and I see that a little bit there, even though they may be what we would call in survival mode around food and shelter and those kinds of things. So I think this is a hard concept to kind of grasp. How can you live in that place of creativity and art when you're struggling for food?
Well, and that's where we have an incredibly, you referenced it, we have an incredibly skewed idea of what survival even means, Michelle. And I think this is kind of one of the kernels here, actually, because what I'm talking about in the book is that it's time to redefine the word weird. And it's also, even more importantly, I feel it's time that we redefine what the word success means. In other words, success used to mean one thing as humanity was trying to develop and evolve its way out of this fight or flight situation with nature and with other people. Now that we've largely stabilized a lot of those things, we really are challenged to say, wait a minute, what is survival even? What does success mean even? Because I feel like it's asking to go through a revolution of what does this mean to me, not what did it used to mean to the cave people or even to my grandparents or parents. It means something different.
Yes, so survival and success and all that, to me, really feels like it's intertwined with my soul. And that's why I like your book so much, because you really you talk about this in your own journey a little bit. Like, if I'm not creative at some level, I feel like I'm dying inside, right? And then that's not successful, or I don't feel like I'm surviving. Like, to feel alive, I got to hit into that creative spark. But that's not always so easy when you're running your life and going to your job and paying the light bill and hearing about the crazy world out there. So how do you recommend we can tap it? Or is it only that there are certain people who are blessed with this? Maybe that's the first question, right?
Well, let me ask, it's interesting. Let me ask you a question first. Have you ever had a time in your life where you were surviving just fine? In other words, you actually, more than surviving, you actually had plenty of money, On the surface, everything was fine, but you weren't having that place in your soul fed. Have you?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Of course. Right. Yeah.
Yeah. Most of us have. And see, that's where I feel like we're at this tipping point, because most people can say yes to that. If most people could say no, I've just barely scraped by and barely found enough, dug enough roots out of the ground to feed myself and my family, then we're still talking about something different. But the fact that you and I can both look each other in the eye, and most people could probably nod their head listening to or watching this, Michelle, and say, yeah, no, I've had times when I had plenty of money, so survival wasn't really an issue, or I was surviving just fine, but I wasn't being fed. Anyway, so I felt like that was important to circle back to. What was the next part of the question? Something about
so here's the thing. Does everybody have the ability to really go in and be creative, or are there certain segments of the population where it's like you and I just feel like we're going to die if we're not creative?
So, wow, what a great question, because I feel like it's our birthright as human beings to be creative. Like, I feel like it's woven into DNA structure, and it's who we are. However, it doesn't seem like everybody has the same do or die feeling about it. Like, if I don't do this, I might as well not breathe. Some people seem pretty okay with cruising along and surviving and paying the bills, and I don't fault that. So what I've come to, Michelle, is I can't really say this group of people should or shouldn't operate that way. I can only speak to those who, like you just expressed, say, I don't know any other way. I have to figure this out. And those are the ones who also have struggled pretty significantly with knowing how to operate in a society that has, at least historically, been largely made up of people who can work just fine as long as they've got their basic needs met. Make sense?
Yeah, interesting. So I wonder so I've never really been able to hold a job, right? And you actually, and you mentioned this in your book, have two jobs, I think, for publishing company, right? Or it's mentioned in the book that when you thank this person, that you work with them in two different roles. Do you consider that like a real job? Or is it so creative that you're able to work within that structure? Because I think there's so many creative people out there who feel like they just can't work within a structure. And are we selling ourselves too short by saying we can't have boundaries or we can't have structure? Because I actually really like structure. So that's
I don't know. Well, you say you like structure, but you also just said that you couldn't hold down a job.
Right. Yeah, exactly. So what does that mean, right? And am I typical?
Well, look, no, I think it's, once again, now we're talking about a whole spectrum. So this entire spectrum, some people work really well in a cubicle, and they they can do their creative work, or they can do their work period inside of the cubicle, and they go home and have to do something else to feel like they're breathing in their soul. I have a brother who runs a tech company, and that's, he expends himself creatively every single day, like pours himself. But he's told me many times, I don't feel like I'm a creative person, and I just laugh. I'm like, the entire business you've created, everything you do there is art. It just doesn't get called art, commonly speaking. As far as I'm concerned, like, I work 2 or 3 jobs, or I wear several hats, I should say. I don't really consider them jobs. And my work, I would have a really hard time if I had a place to be and I had a lot of meetings, a lot of phone calls. I discovered that 10 years ago when I went through a big revolution and breakdown in my own life, and breakthrough was for whatever reason, I could no longer go back to an office and operate just fine, not on a daily basis. So I'm really grateful that I've found work that I get to work in coffee shops and in my house and sometimes my backyard.
Yeah, right. So that's a real interesting point about your brother, I think, because the word creativity seems to imply art.
Yeah.
And my dad was a professional chef. Didn't do it for his career, but that's how he started. And he says, I pour my creativity into my food, right? And your brother pours it into this tech company. There's a lot of ways to be creative. It's a soul calling. It's not the product. That's how I see it. It's not the end product.
Agreed. Yeah, Michelle. So my feeling is whatever whatever I'm doing that makes me feel more alive. So strip away all the spiritually or religious-y kinds of connotation around the idea of soul. It's that raw heartthrob, that raw electric something underneath everything that says this is true. This is true for me. And usually isn't one thing. Usually it's several things for us that makes us feel more alive, makes me feel more alive. So that's how I gauge, though. If I am involved in an activity and I get done with it, and it's not just a matter of being tired or, having expended energy. It's like, oh, I feel actually drained, and not in a good way from doing this, then I need to really examine that, because that means that I'm moving out. My soul can't breathe in that particular thing. So I need to ask, what about it is going on there?
And I think I found that if I'm passionate about things and have some creativity, that I can do the more mundane things. It's like it pulls me through, because there are some things in my life that I have to do, like drive. I'd rather not do, right? I hate driving with a passion, but I have to do it. And so it feels like as long as I have this other balance, it pulls me through.
Right.
Do you think those are connected? Like, do you have things that you just don't do that you don't like to do that you still do that feel mundane? Or have you just gotten rid of everything like that?
Yeah, no, of course. I mean, I don't know. I think people who get that precise and perfectionist about it are not. They're hard to hang out with.
The creativity's gone, right?
Yeah, I think. Come on. Now we've got it dialed in a little too tightly. No, yeah, of course. I do laundry, and I.
Oh yeah, there's an example.
Everything, all those things, and. One thing that's interesting, though, is I'm finding that being deeply creatively engaged, I think you just got done saying it, being creatively engaged means that parts of me are always working on what's important to me, no matter, even if I'm doing something mundane, right?
Ooh, interesting.
Yeah.
So what do you mean by parts of you? Like your brain is working on it?
I think so, yeah. I think one thing I've always found really fascinating, Michelle, is how vast the psyche is, and so I'm always interested in, whether I know it or not, what my unconscious, subconscious, superconscious is picking up on. And so I've learned that if I can get myself over the hump and get creatively engaged, in my case, writing a book, if I can get truly engaged in it to where the characters or the storyline or whatever is talking, then a lot starts to become in the air around that. So I'm starting to pick up things all day long, every day, even when I'm not sitting there typing. So I might be driving, I might be taking care of children or making dinner or something, but that part of me is always engaged. Now I'll say this: if I've gone dry and stale, creatively speaking, then life does become incredibly flat. And so even in those mundane times when I am creatively engaged, then it feels really good, even if I'm not sitting there typing away, because something is always working. But if I'm not working, if I've turned away from my calling for some reason, if I'm playing small or falling short of that in some way, then I know it, because then life across the board starts to get pretty flat. Does that make sense?
It totally makes sense. So at those times when you're totally flat, maybe you have writer's block or you're not engaged, how do you re-engage? What do you do to spark that creativeness inside you again?
God, it's hard. I'd like to say I made this up, but Julia Cameron, in her book, The Artist's Way, which is really, I know you're nodding, because it's really for writers, but it's for all creatives. And she teaches how to do this morning pages process in the morning, and also how to go on artist dates. So I find that if I will do those, if I'm feeling completely flat and dry, if I can just trust the process and start writing for 10 or 20 minutes every morning in longhand, and then go on a hike without my phone, without even taking pictures to show other people on social media or whatever, if I just go, do something special and just go and soak in the beauty. I find that those deep aquifers that I've feared are all dried up and won't ever, produce anything again. Not only are they there, but they've just been waiting for me to actually shut up long enough to tap into them again.
Yeah, I've had the privilege of interviewing Julia Cameron in the past, and one of my idols and mentors. So thank you for bringing her up.
Yeah.
Do you exercise? You said you hike. Do you do other forms of exercise?
Yeah, and I find that the older I get, the more I have to pay attention to that because it's such a critical part of the whole energetic body. So in other words, I'm finding if I don't exercise, I can count on having a harder time creatively. Yeah, so if I get out there and get on my bike, and I live near mountains here in Idaho and Boise, and so I can find trails all around here. If I just get on my bike for 10 or 20 minutes, it makes a huge difference. Of course, if it's wintertime and I go to the gym and lift some weights or something, yeah, that helps too. But I don't think that can be underestimated, Michelle. And good question. I think that everything is connected to everything. And so if I'm not
Yeah.
paying attention to my physical, like right now, I think I mentioned to you, I'm doing this Whole30 thing. So it's 30 days of really, really super clean eating. And the first few days are difficult, but I'm doing it intentionally because my paying care, taking care of my energetic body and making sure that's clean, that I can receive creative impulses. That's so critical to me. I was starting to feel like I was getting foggy for some months there. So.
Yeah, I think brain fog is a real challenge for so many of us right now. And, devices, bad food, lack of exercise, right? For some people, lack of clean water and air,
Yeah.
even.
Wow.
But I think there is a huge connection between creativity and moving your body.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like you. If I'm stuck, I get out and move my body. I walk, I hike as well, and just get out there and move. It frees up something that's stuck inside.
Agreed.
Yeah.
It was funny. I just led a writer retreat in Sedona. I know you and Karen do that sometimes too, and it was such a special experience. And one of the ladies who joined us there is a Pilates instructor, and she does yoga and things. So she actually led us through the 5 Tibetan rites.
Nice.
Yeah, which I'd never, but they're really simple exercises. And she said, this is kind of the Tibetan monks. This is their version of a really strong cup of coffee first thing in the morning. And it's known to prolong life and energetic levels, for many, many, many years. And yeah, Michelle, I mean, it was just really interesting to go through that experience and these really simple things. And she said, there's these, the teachings around it say that it lights up and aligns all the chakras, and it makes the entire energetic body work together. I think that's one thing. Speaking of weirdishness, in the Western world, we like to fall on science and the rational mind so much that sometimes we've thrown out these things with the bathwater, so to speak.
Right.
And I think it's important to go back and just say, hey, I don't even need the story about it. Whether this is holy or sacred or whatever, it doesn't matter. If I move my body this way, I feel a lot better and I feel more creative and energetic. So.
Right. I want to circle back and just mention for people watching and listening that you mentioned Karen, who is a dear friend of both of ours and a writing buddy, a mastermind buddy for me as well, and Karen Curry Parker. So she and I have done writing retreats. I want to come to one that you do. I think that'd be awesome. So you and I will have to talk about that.
I used to roll into a class that I was going to teach, and just be, hey, I can trust that my energetic body is going to be fine. I've had to become more and more aware that I have to take care of it. If I want access to stuff that's greater than, just what my personality can contain, I really have to take care of this stuff.
Greater access to what your personality can contain.
Yeah.
You're going to have to expand on that, please. Greater access. Start with what your personality can contain. So you're talking about accessing what's out there. How do you access it?
Well, all right. So first of all, the container is, the container for me is the, mind, the body and the ego and the, the intellect. So the personality, my emotions, this whole little package known as Jacob Nordby, it can contain, it's like a container, a bowl or a bucket or something. It can contain so much energy and so much information. But I've come to find out that that isn't enough. If I'm only relying on the fuel that I am able to carry around inside of this container every day, that's going to be exhausted very quickly, especially when the demands of meeting the public grow. So more and more people want what you're sharing, you know, especially anybody who becomes an artist and starts sharing it to the world, people want more and more of it. So I've had to learn to access it's almost like turning my face or watching the way the plants turn their faces toward the sun and receive that energy. And if they were only relying on what little bit of energy they could hold inside them, they would wilt and die very quickly, Michelle. And I've learned that the creativity it's not really mine. I'm receiving it. It gets filtered through and interpreted by this little unique winding known as Jacob, and also known as Michelle, and everyone who's listening. And then it goes out and it becomes something different than, like, no one else can do it my way or your way. But if I'm only relying on what's inside of this personality, then I am going to fall down quite a bit. And it's easy then to fall into addictive behaviors, to look for that energy source from other people, from, you know, and that's what I think we've seen down through history with artists, is there's been oftentimes a fractured, dysfunctional relationship to where they're getting their energy source. And so, yeah, they have this insanely, just amazing talent, but they many times would go on these big roller coasters. They'd share and create, and then they would reach a certain point and they'd crash down. Some of them get into a lot of illness or dysfunction. And I can see why, because it's easy to ride the ego roller coaster. And I'm not saying ego is a bad thing. It's just part of this container, right?
Right. We have it.
Yeah.
Yeah. You know, that whole addiction thing is interesting because it's easy to be addicted to the creative process too.
For me, an addiction is something that gives with one hand and takes back with two.
Yeah. Good point.
Right.
Yeah.
And so for me, creativity, you're right. It's like it does become, it's like recognizing a need, but it doesn't steal from me if I'm doing it well.
It fulfills me in a way that I don't have to turn elsewhere. I guess.
I like that. I don't think I've ever thought about it that way before. That's really good.
Interesting.
What a good reason to be disciplined. And that's the hard thing, Michelle, is to turn toward the call of the soul. It sounds like the most natural thing in the world, but it can be difficult to break out of, this is my pattern, this is what I'm doing, and go sit down and write, or perhaps meditate.
Can I just laugh for a minute? Whoever said writing is easy, said no one ever, right? I'm editing. I'm in editing in my book, and I did a live stream this morning. I slashed and burned it last night myself,
Wow.
Before I sent it to the editor. There is nothing that is easy about writing, but it can be very fulfilling. So I had to just laugh for a minute when you're talking about the writing process.
Well, and I so agree. God, it's exposing. That's what's funny to me, is the entire process is always exposing who we really are. And part of us is deeply insatiable to do that in a lifetime, to say, yeah, I want to show up as myself, and I want to reveal who that is. And then there's also a tremendous amount of fear about that, because, as Marianne Williamson says, it's not our darkness we're afraid of, it's our light, So it can be really hard sometimes to continue to show up and say, this is who I am, and get metaphorically naked and say, this is who I am, simply, and without all the explanation and all of that, just keep showing up. I think that's partly why it's so difficult.
It's very difficult. What creative projects are you working on now?
I have a book that halfway wrote itself in 2011, titled The Cosmic Compass, and it's a novel, but it's a novel that is sort of connected to a game of intuition called The Cosmic Compass. A friend of mine did this, and it's been really powerful. And so it halfway wrote itself, and so now I'm back to it, and I'm really excited because we're delving into Solomon's Key and past lives and
nice
travel and all this great stuff. So I'm back to writing a novel, which I'm happy about. That was my first book, was a novel, and the second one damn near killed me. Writing the nonfiction, so we're back to storytelling. We'll see how that goes.
And what else do you do creatively? Anything? Like, do you paint or do anything else, or do you pour your creativity into your writing?
Yeah, good question. I've done so much of all those things. When I was a kid, I was really searching for which thing was my thing, and so I used to sing in a gospel quartet when I was a kid, and a whole different lifetime ago. And I used to paint and draw a lot, and I played the violin, played in the symphony. It's funny. It seems to be fairly well channeled down at this point to writing, but also in spurts, I do a podcast. Um, and some things like that. But I think over the last few years, Michelle, it's really been a question of really honoring the energy level that it requires to get focused in one area. And I'm not saying for everyone else, just for myself. That's been really important because I used to have so much energy for everything, and I've had to really recognize that. Okay, life. The time is limited, life is short, and if I really want to get something done, I need to focus on it. And so one area I'd love to develop more, though, is music. I want to learn how to play the guitar, and I'd like to get back to really making music, because that's something that fills me up. How about you?
Nice, interesting. Great question. So I don't know that we have time for it today, but one of the things that I like to explore is the relationship between being passionate and creativity. And I find that I have a lot of passionate activities. I ballroom dance, I swing dance, I hike, I do all these kinds of things, and I don't necessarily consider them my creative outlets.
Mm-hmm.
And so, but there's some connection there, right? By dancing, I'm allowed to be more creative and braver in other areas of my life. Again, it's moving the body, I think.
Right.
Yeah. The book is Blessed Are the Weird, and you can find out more at blessedaretheweird.com and everywhere books are sold. It's a manifesto for creatives. If you've ever felt like you didn't quite fit, this book is for you. If you ever have felt like there's something inside your soul that wants to come out, this book is for you. This book is for everybody. Although the beginning, we said maybe not, right? But everyone can read it and get something out of it. Thank you for joining me today, the author Jacob Nordby, and love talking with you as always, Jacob.
Thank you so much, Michelle. What a pleasure, and love comparing notes with a kindred spirit. So thank you.
Thank you for joining me on Spark the Radically Authentic Life. Don't forget to subscribe, iTunes, YouTube, and everywhere podcasts are found. Find out more at thespark.love.